This is a nightmare. Roger Ebert has ruined Casablanca now.
Welcome back to Foreplay. We are concluding our Money Shot arc with the Roger Ebert pick, of course. And we selected a film from his, top 10 movies of all time, which
His
is
favorite film.
Casablanca.
It is actually
I love
his favorite film of all time. So, he couldn't miss. He couldn't miss with this one, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. But before we do that, we're going to talk about our next arc. And, with Money Shot, we picked like the really big, really famous movies that really raked in all the dollars. But for the next one, we're going back to deep cuts because we hate having viewership. So in honor of Halloween, we are going to do a scary deep cuts arc of 4 films. I have not seen any of these. Now, I am not a scary movie or horror connoisseur. That's more like Richard's domain. But so Richard and Thorin have selected all of these films. We'll be starting with Session 9. We will then go into a Japanese film, which is Cure from 1997. We will then take a South Korean film, which is Gonjiam, spelled Gonjiam, Haunted Asylum from 2018, which is a Korean found footage film. And we will end with apparently one of Richard's favorite films, Kill List. I have seen none of these, so I'm going to be going in blind, like probably a lot of you guys will. We are going to do Asian horror, like half it is Asian horror. So enjoy is all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And probably, I hope some of you
will
watch
It's important to have it because the reason for the selection is this does tick a lot of the different boxes of horror. And I think it's interesting to look at, like, other countries' take on things you might not have been, necessarily exposed to. I don't particularly like found footage and jump scare kind of movies, but Gonjiam Haunted Asylum probably has perfected that art form. And it'll definitely, if you're the type of person that, shit gets in your head, that one will definitely shit you up a little bit. But equally, as with all things, these are very much 50-50 movies. If it's not the kind of thing that triggers your fear response, some of you will come away going, well, none of that was scary. But for us, hopefully at least 70% of you are going to be.
I mean, the reason why I think
by the end of the arc.
First of all, as you'll notice by the fact Monty's never even seen most of them, these also aren't like the most famous horror movies. We've been a little bit sort of like more sleeper with our cuts here, but also another reason why foreign language horrors can be really effective is because obviously horror itself, one of the big misunderstandings of it is it isn't supposed to just be fantastical. That's an excuse often to address things that people are afraid of in society and culture and in history and stuff, but then you'd use the dressing up and the theme of something like a monster or a ghost or something. So I actually find that similarly, since obviously it's going to, in certain cases, like some of the Asian ones, are going to be really jarring to people. They're not going to have an actual into it. So I think actually that can make it also more scary in some ways or more terrifying. You sort of don't know the bits to expect,
I'll also be at peak media wanker levels, by the way, over the course of these movies, because this is what I did like my university thesis on, was horror and how horror reflects societal fears of the times. And if you ever want to understand what a society was anxious about in any current zeitgeist, you go and you get the horror movies and you watch them. And that's all you would need to do to really understand any society. So that was my premise, at least. I think it was called Society Gets the Monsters It Deserves, because, yes, I really was a media wanker. I'll be peak pretentious, insufferable. So I'm glad Monty's coming in with a fresh set of eyes.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, to be like a contrast to that, because I'm sure it will be insufferable for 4 episodes. But.
I mean, the thing about it, it's not that I dislike horror or scary movies or anything. I just never really got it, did the deep viewing into it. So it's a kind of an unexplored genre.
That's also why, aside from some of these, I haven't even seen all these. I don't claim to be a horror expert myself, but I've just watched like the really good films that are horror. I will say as well, the other reason I like the films we've picked is because I do feel like it's the easy, because it's a genre that inherently has a lot of incredibly cheap films in, incredibly tactless and tasteless films, and tends to be very cheap and manipulative with the tricks used. It can be something that's very easy to get put off when you're young and think, oh, horror films are just essentially like a shit haunted house, aren't they? Whereas the really good ones, that's why I said for this arc, it shouldn't just be horror films. It should be like truly scary ones. Like, for example, mine's mainly a psychological horror. It's once it gets under your skin, it gets in your head and sort of fucks you a bit. Like, I think that can be, if you've only ever seen the jump scare type films or the guy get with the knife, you're going to think horror's a bit one note, but actually some of these are excellent. Like, they'll really stay with you for a while.
Yeah, I mean, just to put a pin in this before we segue into Casablanca as well, like the reason I think I had an affinity with horror was, I distinctly remember my mother was ridiculously irresponsible with what she would let me watch. Not only let me watch as a kid, but she would recommend stuff and it would shit me up for days. Like, I mean, I know you despise this movie, but I must have seen Don't Look Now when I was like 9 years old.
That's
like,
I
like the beginning of that movie. I think the beginning of the movie is great. But the end is a little whack.
Yeah, I mean, but like to a 9-year-old,
it'd be terrifying.
A dwarf serial killer slashing someone's throat.
I can't even imagine.
She did that.
I'd love to see your
child dies.
I'd love to see his face the moment that killer
sleep
was
today.
revealed. I bet he was just fucking destroyed. I know. I bet you were living it, mate. I know.
That and the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like, and
also Donald Sutherland. So there's a theme here. Okay.
Donald Sutherland was the fucking boogeyman for me growing up, dude. Like, it was fucking ridiculous. I couldn't handle it. So, like, yeah, I was like genuinely terrified, awake for days, thinking there might be a pod in the bedroom and they get you when you're asleep, man. I was fucked up. And my mother thought this was hilarious. That, like, she's just given her son, like, unbelievable nightmares. She said, you big baby, scary stuff down the road, grow up. Like, fucking hell. So I'm looking forward to that arc for me.
And that's why Richard is the way he is.
There you go. Exactly.
Blame, like Freud said, blame the mother. It was
that's
all
the villain origin story there.
I will, before we do Casablanca, I will tease our next couple of arcs after this, because what we're gonna do, guys, is we're gonna experiment with kind of working with some new releases that are coming out. So because Gladiator 2 is coming out, we're going to do a Sword and Sandals arc for you guys that's going to culminate in Gladiator 1 and 2. And then after that, because Robert Eggers' remake of Nosferatu is coming out, we're going to do another director arc with Robert Eggers, and that'll take us kind of through the end of the year. So guys can look forward to that. I'm not sure we have finalized our lists of films for both of those at this point in time, but you can probably
The good thing with Robert Eggers is it's a real short list.
Yeah, it's very short list.
He's done it for us. Really.
Spoiler, it's The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and Nosferatu, right?
But they are all bang. I haven't seen Nosferatu. They are all banger stuff. If you've never seen any of his films, you'll love that arc. It's really good.
Yeah, it is going to be a good arc. But yeah, the Sword and Sandals, obviously, like, there's 70 years of 100 years of cinema on kind of classically set films like that, especially a bunch from like the 50s.
I think they kind of choose themselves. I think you got to do Spartacus, Ben-Hur. Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Like, and then Gladiator 1, Gladiator 2, done, easy. So,
we got to have one more in
argument.
there. We'll collapse Gladiator 1 and 2 probably into one
right.
show, so we'll slide another one in there. Maybe, I know Thorin wanted like Troy, the director's cut of Troy, which I'd be down for.
Yeah, we could do a more modern one. I would also argue, I mean, we could slip in a Ray Harryhausen's Jason and the Argonauts.
That's a banger too. That's a good show.
There you are. Just putting that out there. So right, but we can have that argument on Discord in weeks to come. So.
Which is, by the way, an example of the fact that in the modern day, I can't even imagine what the world actually is like for young people, because that's the sort of film in the UK when everyone only had the free TV that is just played every year. Like, that would be on like a Saturday afternoon or something. So everyone of our age has seen that film. Every single person. Or Christmas or something, they always play those films.
It's an absolute fucking banger. You watch it every single time.
Oh, mate, the bit with the skeletons is straight fire. I love all that shit. Yeah. Clash of the Titans, same shit.
Oh, Clash of the
absolutely.
Titans. We're actually going to do Clash of the Titans on Nerd Legion soon, because Doa and I are doing a viewing of every sword and sorcery movie from the 1980s.
Which, by the way, sounds quite on brand, but okay. It sounds almost comically on brand, like a parody in some ways, but well done.
I will sidetrack us. So we started that with Hawk the Slayer, which is that British B movie from 1980, which is great. It was so fun to watch, honestly. So that's already up, guys, on the same channel if you want to go check it out.
How clear the rotation is Lady Hawk? Where's that coming? Fucking give me a break. I know. Just give me a break. I wouldn't watch any of these films.
Hawk the Slayer?
Of course I have. I mean, it also it lives in infamy because it's a line from the British sitcom Spaced, where the guy who runs the comic store that he works in, he got into a fight with someone because he said Hawk the Slayer was shit.
I've seen that clip. Yeah, I've seen
that. So, but yeah, I've seen it. Seen Lady Hawk as well. I loved all that shit as a kid. My uncle showed me fucking Conan the Barbarian. Again, wildly inappropriate when I was like 9 years old. I used to go around my uncle's house to get fed all of the 18 action movies like RoboCop and Predator and Conan.
Nice.
Come home to my mother. She'd go, "You shouldn't be watching all that violence. Here's Don't Look Now." Fucking like.
By the way, speaking of which, being as James Earl Jones just died, every pleb rushed to go, "Oh, Darth Vader." No, Thulsa Doom, motherfucker. Thulsa Doom.
Always.
You need to know that guy. Put some respect on that name. Or he'll put you on the Tree of War, motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. You shall contemplate your misgivings on the Tree of War.
We will definitely watch that film again at some point. Don't worry about it. We will definitely get some Conan in there. Don't even worry about that.
Yeah, 100%. Casablanca, more serious than Lady Hawk or Hawk the Slayer.
By the way, though, this is also perfect if you think about this arc, because actually, just like movies like The Godfather, everyone obviously has heard of this film, and they've obviously even just like we said about The Godfather, where there's a million quotable lines and memes and references that even if you haven't seen this film, you have heard these lines, or you've heard that said, or you've heard that quote used as a title of an episode of a TV show. But it's another one of those ones, so it has become its own hackneyed cliche, but it still holds up. It's still really good, and it still does everything it tries to do really well. But I want to say one thing at the outset, which is this. One thing people are going to really miss about this film, because I didn't think about this myself till recently, is when I came to obtain this film, one thing I never did the first time I saw it is look at the year it was released. It came out in 1942, so I never thought of this. Since a central plot point is about people trying to escape Nazi occupation in Europe, bro, that must have hit so much harder when this movie came out while the war was going on. Like, because that's the other thing. The movie works anyway, by the way, guys, and it sets up the bad guys. The Nazis are still the eternal bad guys, and there'll always be a great foil to a good guy and a hero and a rebel. But it must. I didn't realize until I saw that it must, when it came out, have been fucking mind blowing. This film.
It's also a really solid meta commentary on American indifference to the war, right?
Which we can talk about the historical context, because what's interesting about this is that this movie came out less than 1 year after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which launched America into World War II. So that was December 1941.
So there's some subtext going on here, right?
Oh, yeah. December 7th, 1941 was when Pearl Harbor occurred. And the American public, if you guys don't know, was pretty against, generally, in going into World War II, because it was not thought of as an American conflict. Like you had, Japan and its colonies in the East, and then them allying with Germany and all the fighting going on. Like there was sympathy from the Americans.
Also remember,
but the Americans, like,
one thing people always forget, Monty, is yes, there's a lot of English ancestry in America. There's loads of Germans as well. There was loads of fucking Germans living who were just like only moved over 1 or 2 generations. They also didn't want to go to war for obvious reasons. Yeah.
And also, I mean, if even Japanese ancestry, especially in Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor occurred, and also in California,
the internment camps.
They had those, the internment camps in the Central Valley in California.
I know it's weirdly, Monty. Not a lot of movies about internment camps in America. Loads of World War II films.
Strange.
Tell you what, you can put lists arms along about Nazis, the fucking Holocaust, that nothing about those internment camps. Weird that, isn't it?
In about 50, 60 years, you will get a wave of movies about that. It's just a little too close to the bone right now. But it's like, if you look at what American cinema, obviously we've got, lots of movies about, the slave trade. We've got lots of movies about the genocide of the indigenous people. Sure. It'll get there. There'll be like, a dozen or so movies in 50 years about that. But it is a curiously absent piece of American history. Yeah.
Right. And so basically to set the stage, like America wasn't involved. So what happened was, basically everybody got dragged into World War II because America declared war on the Japanese for the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, and the destruction of part of the American Pacific Fleet. And then what happened was, because of the system of alliances, like Germany and Italy got kind of roped into the war as well. And then America decided that we're going to start attacking in the European theater. Right. And so this movie was actually rushed out to release because it was, I mean, this is very Hollywood, right? It was supposed to like come out later because it was basically filmed in the same year it was released, right? So this was like banged out super, super quickly, but it was then rushed into the theaters because the Allies were invading North Africa at the time, and it was kind of like one of the first forays from American troops into World War II. So this was really designed around the news cycle of World War II, right?
Yeah.
And it does an amazing job, I think, of setting up all of the different factions, which we will describe to you, because like this movie is kind of hard to understand if you don't understand like Vichy France and like the French government that was propped up once the Nazis invaded Paris, right? Because basically the Vichy French government, so Charles de Gaulle, who you guys probably know, who's the famous like rebel general in World War II from France.
That's a shit
like,
airport named after him.
It's a very terrible
I'll always say
airport.
that every time I have a chance to.
The worst.
You have to understand that airport was like Vietnam for me and Richard. We still haven't gone over it. It's been years now, and I'll never go there again. That's
a really bad airport in Paris. It's the main.
Upsettingly, I'm back there in a few
no!
days, so.
You have to realize, Richard. I'm genuinely. I'm at my fucking Neil Macaulay in Heat. I'm never going back, brother. I told you. I don't know. I'll die before I go back there.
So anyway, this is all set up because obviously there are Nazis in this movie, but you have Morocco was a French protectorate, like a French colony. So it's all these people who are kind of going to Morocco, who probably were trying to, they're escaping the Nazis, but now there's a lot of questions like, is Morocco, who is, Claude Rains' character loyal to, who's like the chief of police there in Casablanca, because like the government has just changed over. Obviously there's a lot of talk in this movie, and there's flashbacks to the Nazi invasion of Paris and like fleeing Paris, right, with Rick and Elsa. So it really does show how everything in Europe has been upset. The dream of coming to America to escape the war, because America is obviously like besides Hawaii is like relatively untouched, by this. And also just the kind of crazy mix of people who are all, in this North African French colony, which, I think a lot of people wouldn't expect. It's not, when you say Morocco, you don't think of like this like hodgepodge of European people fleeing, and you get every nationality. Like even in Rick's employ, you have Sasha, like the Russian bartender. You have French people.
Remember, he says at one point in the movie as a joke, like, "Oh, the head of the #1 Swiss bank or whatever is like works in my pastry chef or something."
Yeah, Dutch bank.
Because that's one thing, by the way. Actually, as you're saying it, Monty, that is what the first basically like 20 minutes of this film is. It just establishes the whole place they are and all the dynamics of what they're talking about. But it does it in like a really sort of like slow way.
Perhaps if you told him I ran the second largest banking house in Amsterdam.
Second largest? That wouldn't impress Rick. The leading banker in Amsterdam is now the pastry chef in our kitchen.
It doesn't bash you over the head with it. Does it in quite a good way.
What I love about that as well is it's almost like a precursor to aspects of like sci-fi and cyberpunk dystopian.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, sure.
Which is like, the collapse of, kind of like nations essentially. And so you all end up like in sci-fi on a space station with all the alien races all fighting each other, like Babylon 5, Deep Space Nine. Or in cyberpunk, it's that, that just these huge mega cities, because capitalism is the only true nation, right? The corporations of the countries now, and so you see Japanese people, Russian people, American people all in one place, or in sometimes those elements blend together. I was watching this and thinking it must have been kind of like crazy for the time to see people from all over the world just in this one place, linked by the common theme of what's going on in the war. And it had like a really modern feel. Like,
it's still. I mean, you want to go to Rick's Cafe today. Like, it seems like a fucking awesome place to hang out, right? Yeah. And you get this. What's so funny about this too is you get this. It's this massive blending of cultures where it does feel really postmodern, because even Rick's American cafe. The name is Rick's Café Américain, which is French, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's very funny.
Even
like,
the idea that in Morocco he would have like a black Southern guy doing sort of like old time is actually mad, isn't it? So it's mega for this film, and it became iconic, but it's actually so out of place, isn't it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's just funny because you see the dichotomy between Rick's and the Blue Parrot, you know, Sydney Greenstreet's character's cafe, which is much more like, here's the water pipe, here's the hookah, the shisha on the table.
By the way, can we just get this out of the way? If you already watched the film noir arc, spoiler, 10 minutes in, you're going to see Sydney Greenstreet, the fat man from
Peter
the Faulty
Lorre.
Smoker, and then you're going to see Peter Lorre, that bug-eyed little wanker who's the one. They're both in the film immediately. Like, essentially, they must just be fucking Bogart's Avengers crew. Like, I've got a posse. God damn it, I'm in again. Like, it's ridiculous. They're rolling it again.
What I'd forgotten, actually, is Peter Lorre's cameo is tight.
It is, isn't it?
I mean, he's very memorable, but yeah, it's
always memorable.
Remember, his whole character is just to establish there's the letters of transit. This is where you go to do this. But Rick doesn't ever get involved. And so because he lets you get killed like that, even though you said, please help me, that's to establish that, like, it takes something really special to make him get, which obviously sets up the rest of the film. But even that is actually brilliantly done. It's not like it's wasted. It's just to establish the rest of it. Like, this film is full of foreshadowing, by the way. Like, the whole first half's like setting up what the rest of it's going to be in it. They're even doing lines constantly, you know, you're a cynical man, Rick, you know, like all that shit all the time.
Rick, help me. Be a fool, you can't get away. Rick, hide me. Do something. You must help me, Rick. Do something. Come on. Rick!
Also, I do want to highlight before we get into this that a lot of the crew on this film were actually people who had fled World War II in Europe.
Yeah.
So it really was like a lot of people who had already been displaced making a film about people being displaced, which is, I think, part of the reason why it like hits so hard.
Well, I mean, obviously, Bogart was a veteran as well.
Right.
You know, he was in the Navy. But what I was going to say is, I was going to ask you, which version did you watch? Because I watched there's a restoration that came out a few years ago, 4K. Fuck me, this film is beautiful. Like
by the way, it is for the 40s, for a black and white film, it is very well done. But I will say one small detail though. Monty maybe will appreciate this. Is every time they go to a close-up, Monty, they use that Hollywood like beauty filter.
The soft filter.
Which it does make you look extra beautiful, but it's absurd how much they use it in this film. Like,
it is so funny, especially
you would think this was a commercial. Yes, the second they go to Ingrid Bergman.
I'm pretty sure Ingrid Bergman
it's outrageous in it. I know.
In a contract.
It's actually outrageous.
For those Zoomers, it's like the 1940s Instagram filter.
Yes, it is.
Where it's like when Ilsa, Ingmar Bergman, first shows up in Rick's and they see her and it's just this like long shot with like the soft filter on her. So it looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was informed you were the most beautiful woman ever to visit Casablanca. That was a gross understatement.
You're very kind.
I mean, but I'll say, I mean, like the lighting in this movie. What I love about it as well is it's really well lit. The shot composition is fantastic, but it's also got diegetic lighting, which you don't really see like a lot of, except in not when you're shooting on film. Like generally the diegetic lighting thing is done, with like, digital camera, kind of grainy, kind of like real life, almost like documentary style shooting of films. The spotlight outside continually sweeps past people to remind you of this, element of where they live. And it's just beautiful. It's just fantastic. It looks so good. And I was like really taken aback. Like I paused the movie at one point. It was a shot. It was just so crisp. They did a fantastic job with that restoration. But I mean, obviously, like the director, Michael Curtis, he just did a fantastic job, man. Just knocked it out the park with this. This movie is stunning to look at.
Yeah, I also love all the the film noir shadow work they do. Except if you remember when we did the Maltese Falcon, which as Thorin mentioned has many of the same actors in this and much of the same feel. They do it with all of the blinds on the window, right, and this kind of shadow work. This one's really cool because they do it with like Moroccan geometric designs. That are overlaid on people, so you really get this exotic feel to it, where it looks like the lighting from a film noir, but it feels like you're in a very unique place.
The shot when he goes to the safe at the start of the film, and it's just Bogart's silhouette, and it's framed with that Moroccan arch. Yeah. Like that is fucking mental. That is crazily good. I mean, that's like Hitchcockian, you know. That's how good we're talking about.
Well, remember, people always say, you know, it's a kid event. That's like the exact same era, guys. Like, that's the other thing I'll say about this film. Do not, just like we said about The Godfather for a film from the 70s, do not look at the date and hear 1942, I'm out, black and white. Like, no, like, actually, this film has, because obviously, essentially, I would say it's the other way around. Obviously, everything was influenced in the modern day by this film. It has so many modern sensibilities as a film. It's not at all, like, actually, even if you didn't like the film noir, you'll probably like this film. Like, it's not as cliched. It's not as, like, for example, another thing I was thinking about when I was watching this film is, you know, I made the point on the film noir one of the problems I've always had with film noir, and by the way, any film featuring like James Cagney or any of those old school actors is, they're really mega, and then everyone else is like a fucking 2D stick man in terms of the depth of the characters. Like, they're all shit. They're all doing that thing where, you know, they walk in and it's like they're getting paid by the second for the line. Like, what are we doing? What are you doing? Hey, you there? Stop that. And it's just terrible, right? There's no like pacing. There's no Stanislavski method. First of all, this isn't a film that's only Bogart. Like, by the way, the Rains guy who plays Renault, he's fucking mega too. That's in fact one thing I forgot, because I watched this film a long time ago. I remember this film for Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart. It's like the peak of Bogart. Mate, the Claude Rains guy is fucking low-key sleeper banger in this.
I've often speculated on why you don't return to America. Did you abscond with the church funds? Did you run off with the senator's wife? I like to think that you killed a man. It's the romantic in me.
It's a combination of all three.
And even the guy they cast as the main Nazi, that's going to be one of the most god-tier piece of casting ever. He even looks like a ridiculous Nazi. He's outrageous. Like, that guy's he has the face of a caricature Nazi. It's insane, isn't it? But he kills the role. And by the way, like I say again, the Claude Rains guy, actually, low-key, by the end of the film, I was loving him. I think I missed it when I first watched it, like the subtlety. Like, for example, and we'll get to this later, but I think when I first saw this film, I never understood that they were hinting that he also might have been playing both sides the whole time, and like, he maybe isn't fully. I always thought he was just like, he's just the not quite as bad version of the bad guys. You know, when I watched it, I was like, there's so much more depth to this film than I remember.
The actor that played the Nazi officer is a guy called Conrad Veidt, and he fled Germany. He fled Germany. He was married to a Jewish woman, and they fled to America. They were given like asylum out there, and he was actually second billing on this film. He was a very well-regarded actor. If you look at all the original posters and all the promotions, he was second billing after Bogart, and you know, ahead of Ingrid Bergman even. Sorry, he was he was on the posters though. Obviously, sorry, I've got that wrong. Ingrid Bergman and Bogart were up there above him, but he was promoted on the posters, and he was paid he was one of the highest paid actors on the set for this, according to the book Round Up the Usual Suspects. But anyway, he portrayed a German officer like that because he had seen what the Nazis did to Germany firsthand. It's like the movie is informed with like some insane like realistic sensibilities. That's the other aspect to this. I think that people might not appreciate. You know, if you're not like a history buff or whatever, there really is an authenticity to this. That's kind of like bubbling up under the surface that a lot of movies from the 40s didn't have, because, you know, as Duncan was talking about, you know, they tend to lean into the ridiculous. They tend to lean into caricatures. The hero is, you know, overtuned, and crime can never pay. The villain always has to be ridiculously dislikable. This is a bit.
By the way, you could argue 2/3 through, he isn't even a fucking hero, poor guy in this. He's actually the sort of guy. If the guys that die,
like both him and Claude Rains are anti-heroes in this movie. Like they are I mean, especially Claude Rains, you end up with this warm, fuzzy feeling by the end of the movie, but you also forget that he's literally just like banging women to give them.
By the way, I also forgot that part, because
like,
remember, this is actually that's something I can now connect to what you guys talked about in those film noir episodes. That's also something I never understood, because I didn't have Richard to give me that whole background about whatever that law was. It the Reynolds law? What was it called? That Hays Code. There you go. Because I didn't know about that. That's why they have to be very careful about how, like, you know, and then maybe like, what if she was to sleep with someone and then that was a bad thing, but it meant something good.
She did a bad thing to make certain of it. Could you forgive her?
Nobody ever loved me that much.
And he never knew. And the girl kept this bad thing locked in her heart. That would be all right, wouldn't it?
Obviously, she just means, should I fuck this guy for the exit visa? Yeah. But they can't say that because actually, that you're not allowed to talk about sex like that. You're not allowed to talk about using.
She's like, but what if somebody did something really bad?
Exactly.
But never told her husband. I was like, oh my god.
I know, but because you don't realise that, they have to be subtle with it. But you're right, they are just like, if you think about it, right. First of all, he just has innocent people killed all sorts of times. He absolutely says he like buys and sells people, and yeah, as you say, basically his whole thing is like, look, I'm not even mad actually that you took that one, but don't fuck up this straight up blonde, higher blonde I'm bringing tomorrow, because I'm definitely going to fuck her. It's like, this is mental.
As I suspected, you're a rank sentimentalist.
Yeah, why?
Why do you interfere with my little romances?
Put it down as a gesture to love.
Well, I forgive you this time. But I'll be in tomorrow night with a breathtaking blonde. And it'll make me very happy if she loses.
I've also just checked. So I just want to correct myself. Sorry, it was Paul Henry that fought to be put up above Bergman, not Conrad Veidt, but he was on the posters, and everything else about him being a German refugee is true. Sorry, I just checked Wikipedia.
No, it's good.
Around. But I mean, Paul Henry is the actor who played Victor Laszlo, and he was an absolute prick. He was an absolute prick. He hated Bogart, said he wasn't a good actor. By the way, think about how vanilla he is as Victor Laszlo.
I actually think of the sense. Look, I'm not saying that just because I actually was going to say I thought he was the worst part. He is mega one note. He has, which, by the way, this shows how good a film it is. He should be the heart of the film. If I don't believe in him, how can I want him to succeed? But Bogart's so good, I don't give a fuck that this guy's nothing, because he was just average as fuck when he in this one.
It worked in a way, though, because Ingrid Bergman couldn't stand him, said he was a prima donna. Bogart just thought he was a fucking pussy. I mean, you know what Bogart's like, right?
I love Bogart.
They fucking, I know he's fucking G, isn't he? They both couldn't stand this guy, and obviously it works really well for the chemistry because when Ingrid Bergman looks at Humphrey Bogart, like she's eye fucking him in like every scene, and you genuinely feel that chemistry. Chemistry is off the charts, phenomenal in this film, and obviously Victor Laszlo, the man she ran away from, there isn't that chemistry there, but that actually, because they didn't like each other in real life, so she couldn't fake it, but it works because obviously, even though she is running away with it, it's about the resistance. It's about it's about his work as a resistance fighter against the Nazis. It's not really about him as a man. So that energy between them, it actually really behooves the film. But yeah, Paul Henry was an absolute bellend. Well, like by all accounts.
Also to the point about this too, like everything has to be subtext in this movie because of the Hays Code. And if you guys don't know what the Hays Code is, go back watch our film noir arc because it really informs films from this period. But basically, it was a code of conduct that films had to abide by, which meant that a lot of the books of the film noir books that were being written in the 30s and 40s and 50s were very gritty. They dealt with prostitution and drugs, but they couldn't do that in the movies. So even the movie adaptations of some famous film noir novels end up, being defanged, which is part of the reason why LA Confidential is such a banger, because LA Confidential was the movie that all those other movies should have been, but couldn't be. And, one thing about this film that you have to remember is that portraying adultery positively was against the Hays Code.
Oh, wow.
So it all had to be implied here that, they, like at the end of the movie, they literally couldn't have Rick leave with Elsa. Like that's not an option because that would have been portraying, being like, oh, we're running away from Laszlo together. And it would have been portraying the adultery positively. The way they get away with the adultery in this movie is she thinks that Laszlo is dead. Is the excuse, right, that they gave later, which makes sense for the character as well. Like I don't hate that choice or anything, but the Hays Code really did interfere with this movie in some ways, and also, like we said, with Claude Rains' character, they can't be explicit about what he's doing. It all has to be subtext with Louis Renault, the character.
By the way, as I say, literally this is what actually also the way this movie is told and set up. There's no like crazy like Tarantino changing the timeline. We're all over and bits. It just shown from beginning to end. It's chronological, but the first 20 minutes or so just is so perfect at establishing the whole world you're in. Yeah. Like think about how they set up Rick. He is set up as the ultimate cynical, unsentimental character. He literally, the rule at the beginning they establish is he never joins a customer for a drink. So already when he does, something's different there. When he comes and joins them at that point in time.
Won't you join us for a drink?
Oh, no, Rick.
Well, thanks, I will.
Well, a precedent is being broken. Emile?
He doesn't care if people live or die. That's established immediately. Someone even says at one point in time, some line like isolationism is no longer a policy or whatever. Because as Richard says, it's obviously alluding to things about America, isn't it?
My dear Rick, when will you realize that in this world today, isolationism is no longer a practical policy?
He even says the line, I'd stick my neck out for nobody, multiple times.
When they come to get me, Rick, I hope you'll be more of a help.
I'd stick my neck out for nobody.
When he's with the woman that he was with early on, who later on goes to the Nazi to try and make him jealous, he's too cool. He doesn't give a fuck. They can't get to him. Yeah, go on.
The line he says is, she goes, where were you last night? And he goes, I can't remember that far back. And she goes, will I see you tonight? And he goes, I don't plan that far forward.
Straight fire.
Where were you last night?
That's so long ago, I don't remember.
Will I see you tonight?
I never make plans that far ahead.
By the way,
so many good lines.
yeah, you could. You could never be as cool as he is in this film, which is why it then hits so hard that then he suddenly someone does get under his skin and someone does get in his thoughts, and he is sitting there. She has to come back. The transformation's actually mega. Like another thing is, a lot of people think of Bogart and they just think of him as like that one type of thing. I think he actually shows a lot of range in this film. I think he's mega in this one.
Yeah.
He shows so many facial expressions. Yeah, so I love the setup. Even the setup with that, the setup with the Renault character, they do a really good job.
Yeah, well, you can genuinely believe he's heartbroken as well, which is like Bogart never showed vulnerability.
No,
exactly.
exactly.
He was the movie tough guy.
Yes.
Remember, he wasn't even a lead when he started his film career. He was like the hired muscle. Those were the roles he had. And then when a studio picked him up and basically said, like, we're going to make you a leading man because he got on really well with one of the executives, this is when you get Bogart's great arc. But, like, he very rarely showed vulnerability. And this movie, he does. I mean, there's literally a scene where he's just sat getting Sam to play the sad song that reminds him of her on a piano, drinking a full
mate,
bottle
you've
of
never
spirits.
seen Bogart. He's completely forlorn, mournful.
Yeah.
It's what he's actually heading his hands at one point. It's mega, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
It's like you said, this is definitely, in terms of performance, one of his most ranged and nuanced performances because, yes, in all of the scenes he's interacting with other people, he's putting up this stern front, but when he's alone, we can see a very physical manifestation of just how torn up he is at the fact that, he loved this woman and lost this woman. That flashback as well is where they go back to how they met and how, the whirlwind romance and then the betrayal and just him going away on the train at the end. Fucking fire. Absolute fire.
That's the last call, Mr. Richard. Do you hear me? Come on, Mr. Richard, let's get out of here. Come on, Mr. Richard, come on.
And you know what's crazy about that is that they actually filmed that first. That was the first thing they filmed in this movie. And the rest of the movie wasn't even written yet when they filmed that.
Yeah, the famous urban myth about Casablanca is they wrote the final scenes on the last day of shooting. That isn't true. That's one of those, like, it's too tall a tale. Sure. Nobody would turn up if you didn't know what you were fucking shooting. No actor would come on the set if they didn't have their lines, right? It doesn't work like that. But I mean, they were writing this script as they were shooting it. It was evolving all the time and changing all the time. It was shot out of sequence, which usually that's a recipe for disaster. Usually you get a fucking really incoherent mess when that's happening, right? But not here. This film is tight as a drum in terms of its world building, storytelling, and ultimately, I mean, a message that resonates through the ages, because a lot of people have a misconception that this is a love story.
Yes.
It kind of isn't.
No. In fact, that's one thing I was going to get to. I wondered if you guys are going to bring that up. Here's what's funny. I think this movie is excellent. It is really good. But what's mad is this just shows for me how different I think men and women are, because this is women's one of their all-time favorites. Like, they love, I mean, you can see why I think what we just described. The guy who's too cool for school and in every every other movie's the tough guy. In this one, he gets broken and he has that soft vulnerability. And in the end, for love, he gives it all up. I think the maddest thing is the notion that this is a beautiful romantic movie. I find the ending horrifying. Like here's what's genius: the ending before the speech that's given to the Claude Rains guy about why he does it all, right? From that guy is totally fine. If the idea really was, Richard, that actually secretly she was using Humphrey Bogart's character. She obviously knows that was an affair, but also she knows because she loves the fucking Laszlo guy so much, she has to pretend to love Rick to get the papers and get out. If that was true, that could work for me. That could work as a film. And then I would go, wow, Bogart really did give up love for that, because essentially what he was doing there was going, she loves him, but not truly me. So actually, if I really loved her, I'd want her to be happy, right? That's a cool ending. But the actual ending with that addition of that speech is that, well, of course I could see she was just lying anyway. She really did love you. It's like, so you mean at the end you give up love? Just thought, look, I know everyone's going to go, Thorin, the scales are off on this one, mate. Just to win World War II and beat the Nazis. Look, all I'm saying is that scenario is I'd be selfish if I was Rick. I want love. I want to succeed too. Like, I feel like that's a horrific ending in a way, even though the rest of it's brilliant.
You're saying this only to make me go.
I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
The last half an hour is just quote city. Eventually at the end, by the way, every line of the script's just like, you know, fucking here's looking at you, fucking everything's going to be wonderful. We'll always have it's meant. But when it gets to the end, it becomes a mad.
The Usual Suspects is the reason The Usual Suspects is called The Usual Suspects. Because in that movie, they literally round up the usual suspect.
Major Strasser has been shot. Round up the usual suspects.
At the end, it for real becomes like a bingo card of like famous movie quotes, and then just hit them all. And that's when you realise how iconic this film is. It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. The problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans.
Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that.
By the way, if anyone else says that dialogue, you go, this is corny bullshit. But it's Bogart. So it seems to me that problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy town. You're like, yeah, it's fucking, of course Bogart says that. Of course he says hill of beans. Of course he did.
You know, of all the gin joints in all the cities and all the world, she walks into mine with a fucking banger.
Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you'll wake up wanting to give me. Get me out. Get me out. Oh, wait, that's the original. My bad. I know.
Yeah, unreal. I mean, it's so quotable a movie. Obviously, one of its most famous quotes doesn't even
there we
exist.
Go. Which, by the way, think how mad this is, Richard, because that's literally the name of a Woody Allen film even. Bro, it's so iconic, like, and it never happened. If you watch it, by the way, he never says anything approaching that ever in the film. He doesn't even come that close. That's it.
Yeah, he's like, you played it for her.
I know.
Play it.
Yeah, she says, play it, Sam, and he goes, oh, I've forgotten the song, and then, you know, he does it.
Play it once, Sam, for all time's sake.
I don't know what you mean, Miss Elsa.
Sam. Play as time goes by.
Oh, I can't remember it myself. I'm a little rusty on it.
That's kind of unique, just thinking about that. Because obviously that song, you know, you must remember this, As Time Goes By, it's called. That song itself being used diegetically in the movie as a motif about kind of the whimsy of regret and loss. It's like that's insanely modern.
Mad, isn't it? Yeah.
That's like that's
and you notice they keep the refrain of that music, that piano playing throughout the scenes over and over again to build up that same feeling. Yeah.
It's exactly used for that purpose. And I'm trying to think, because it's not even that it was like contemporary. That's a song from the 30s. So it's not like it was popular. Okay. It's not like people were bumping it right then, like you might see with like a Hollywood movie today where they pick a popular song and it's like molded in because they own a subsidiary and it's the music studio that owns the rights to the art, you know, whatever. It was chosen specifically for the sensibilities the song provides, and it's just crazy. I think I read somewhere in the book it isn't even that song. It's a different song. But I don't have the book on Casablanca to check right now. But someone in the comments will get to it. But anyway, I that is a super artistic, modern way of storytelling that wasn't used a lot in the 40s. It obviously became a more prominent vehicle in the 50s and 60s, where you would essentially use diegetic music to communicate an idea. But this is what I mean. This film is insanely ahead of its time, I think. Like, I genuinely believe that.
Sing it, Sam.
You must remember this. A kiss is just a kiss.
I want to talk about, because like for me, the soul of this movie is Rick's character, right? I think we can agree on that. And we were starting to talk about, what is this movie, like a romance movie? And no, this movie is a movie about Rick in my mind. Yeah. And I think Rick in Casablanca has one of, if not the very best character introductions of any movie I've ever seen, because it's first off the buildup, all of the rumors. Oh, the head of the largest banking house in Amsterdam is now his pastry chef. This guy commands immense clout, right? And prestige. And his place is the cool place where everybody hangs out. But it's also the place where all the deals are done for the visas and people are pawning their jewelry. And what I love about this sequence from the direction and the writing is that we're slowly being initiated into Rick's world. And it goes through, it's like you're going through the gates to the inner sanctum.
Well, remember, literally,
Rick's
you
cafe.
can't go into his office. That's another key thing. No matter who you are, you're not going to get in there.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's like we start in the restaurant and then we go, we go past all these characters and you get to see this melange of people from all over the world. Then you're back in the secret gambling area. And then you don't even see Rick. What I love about this is they're delivering him a check for a cash advance from somebody because people need money here and he's willing to do this. And it hits his desk, right? And then all you see is his hand and it says, "Okay, Rick." And he signs off on it. Then he picks up a cigarette and then the camera follows the cigarette up to Humphrey Bogart's face. And you see him sitting in front of this chessboard and he's playing by himself. And this is the metaphor, right? This is the metaphor for Rick, because the whole movie is him playing a game against himself. And at the start of the film, the black pieces are on his side of the table, right? It's like he's starting as Dark Rick. He's the Rick who now is just in it for himself. Like Duncan said, he sticks his neck out for no man. But we know inside Rick is a guy who used to fight in the Spanish Civil War, who is trying to stop, Franco and the fascist takeover of Spain. We know that he was running guns for Ethiopia. When Major Strasser, the Nazi, comes, he's like, "We have quite the dossier on you." And he he plays it stupid and everything like that. He's like, "You always were, fighting for the losing side." He's like, "It paid well," right? He pretends to be this mercenary. But we know at one point in time, he actually did have ideals, and those ideals come out at the end of the movie. But him just sitting there with, like, in the seat of power, distributing the money, casually smoking, playing the chess game with himself is just so metaphorically perfect and iconic. Like, I never get tired of the first 10 minutes of this movie. It is such a banger.
No, it's like you say,
so well.
If you made like a video game where you went to that bar, it'd be dope, wouldn't it? It'd be like exactly the scene you'd want to like introduce the world and all the underground characters. That's exactly the sort of like CD underground bar you want to go to. It sounds like everything's popping in it.
Yeah, and you get the music too and the orchestra, and it seems like it's a great time, but also there's all this fucked up shit going on in there.
You even get to do interactive things like knock on wood while a guy plays a song like that. Listen, that hasn't aged so well, but that's all good. We'll get into it rather than jump in or whatever.
I do think as well, like having the allegory of like gambling, right? There's a lot of people who are turning up and playing games of chance. They're all doing that right now.
Yeah,
you're hanging around because you're in this wonderful opulence and decadence, and you're insulated from what's happening outside. But that can change. That could change in a heartbeat, and it's like everything about this movie is just like it is just pitch perfect in terms of the story it wants to tell. Like there's nothing here that doesn't really belong. Like in some films they'll tack on like a little arc for a side character and it's not really related to the main plot point. It's a little B story, but it's nice, it's cool. Lots of good films have that. But this is all about Rick's journey from being the hardened cynic how he got there. By the way, I also just love the idea, because it's true, we're all one bad relationship away from being an utter bastard. Like, absolutely spot on.
And also, you notice they shared in the idea that even though initially you would think like a young man, that's cool to be him, you don't really want to be that guy, though. He is the guy when he's just shot on his feet. Like, that's actually sadly a negative to be like him, isn't it? Even though it seems boring as fuck at the beginning. Yeah, true.
But I also love the exploration of that in the movie, that actually there is like a profound sadness at the core of the character. You know, not a lot of movies, again, that have that, you know, big tough guy, you know, male lead. Not a lot of movies really explore, you know, the softer side, the vulnerable side, the hurt, the pain. Like, how do you arrive at this conclusion? This movie does it masterfully, because it's all told so. It's like you say, the storytelling in this movie is so precise and succinct. You know everything about Rick. 10, 15 minutes in, you know everything.
There's not even a MacGuffin or anything. Like, if you don't know, think about what they tell you at the beginning. So we establish, right, there's exit visas, which everyone's there for, because they're all refugees, and that's why everyone's congregating in this area. Hence why you can get this incredible... Like, the joke is, it looks like the people who should be on the French Riviera on some cafe in fucking Milan, but they're all here in North Africa, queued up, and they're even saying, I hope maybe it'll be us on the plane tomorrow. You're seeing them all in the bar. Everyone wants to see Rick. No one gets to see Rick. He's a cool guy, and he does what he wants. He goes around. Then they even say, well, the only reason I let this guy operate the bar is you don't ever sell the exit visas, do you? But the first character, because you can't get the exit visa because that requires the signature of the Nazis and stuff like that, don't worry, there's these transit papers though, which we established in the first scene with the Ugarte guy. Already Rick has in his safe, but remember, Rick's not the sort of guy who cares for people and would sell that sort of thing. You know, he'd be using it as a pawn. So then if you think about it, right, that's how tightly scripted it is. By the way, almost the entire film takes place in this bar. They just show you the outside and like one or two scenes. Everything somehow is just in a different room in this bar, because that is the place. As he says, everyone wants to go to Rick's or whatever, that fucking come to Rick's or whatever that line is. So also if you think about it, right, it's all just about getting that, and all the fucking breakdowns in the bar, in the back room with Ingrid Bergman and that, like almost every scene takes place there, just a different area in the bar. It's actually, it's one of those films where by the end, it's just the relationships and the people that have changed and who has what item. There is, like I say, there's no secret MacGuffin, really. We already know about the letters. Everyone does. By the way, they even know that Rick de Laszlo did that, but they're trying to get him. Everyone knows Rick probably has him, but is he going to sell it? You know what I mean? That's how you know how tightly done it is. It doesn't need actually a big surprise. The surprise, if this wasn't fucking telegraphed in the film, is obviously just that he has a change of heart at the end, and he's such a great guy. He lets her win anyway, doesn't he? But surely you see that coming. Surely you saw that train like coming down the tunnel, guys. Come on.
But that's what I love about this film, because in a lot of movies that profess to be love movies, it's love over all that wins, right? Love always triumphs, even in something, you know, even in death, you know, like think like a Romeo and Juliet, or more modern sensibilities, a Thelma and Louise driving off the cliff at the end. You know, they're together, right? You know, without compromise, and everyone goes, oh, that's so feel good, because, you know, love won at the end. It's sad that they're dead, but they died together, so it's really good. Oh, it's beautiful. I'm crying, I'm tearing up, right? This is a movie about where not even love can triumph in the face of this far more important issue. And what this movie is about, and what it champions as being a defining quality of better people, is self-sacrifice.
Oh,
that's what it puts.
In many ways, even though people will look at the love thing and he saved them. No, what he also did is save himself. He like redeemed his soul at the end. He has like a purpose again. As they say, welcome to the fight. Like he's actually back in it. And then the genius. I also missed this part when I watched this when I was young. I thought that bit at the end was just a witty thing of like, we get started with beautiful friendship. They're implying they're all going to get involved in that shit. They're all just going to fuck off and do that. And by the way, I also think if you're a young person who watched this for the first time, I'll bet you didn't see him fucking actually covering up that murder at the end, did you? I bet you thought Bogart's definitely going. You never saw that fucking Claude Rains guy go baller mode at the end. That's God mode.
I think that's what's so good about this movie is like the twist with Elsa you can see coming. The twist with Renault.
No, it's sick. It still works. By the way, when you rewatch it works, doesn't it, Richard? When you do like the suspension of disbelief, you can let yourself get tricked by it again. You still feel like, oh, surely he's fucked his whole life by doing this, and then it's so satisfying when that guy does that call. Oh, round up the usual suspects. Oh, you know, from that moment, that's a glorious little ending. What an ending.
I mean, they're just going to pin a body on someone.
No, listen, listen, man.
Be executed.
Well, I mean, but the stakes are set up because basically, the concentration camps were known about at this time, right? And Laszlo escapes from one. There were people escaping from them, so it's not like people didn't know the Germans.
By the way, that line is also a banger line when he goes, "If I didn't tell you in a concentration camp. Wow, did I tell you now? It's like, no, he has sort of done you there, mate. He sort of wrecked you completely, hasn't he? I know.
That's easily his best line in the movie.
You will give us the names? If I didn't give them to you in a concentration camp, where you had more persuasive methods at your disposal, I certainly won't give them to you now.
But you know, at the end of that film, like, it's so interesting because Rick goes in thinking that he's going to get turned over to the Nazis for basically, you know, because he sets up. He
remember, he even says basically, "I'll only take the gun off you once they've taken off, because then you can arrest me, of course." And then it's over at that point. Yeah, of course.
So he knows that the price of this might be that he goes to a concentration camp, but he's willing to do it because Laszlo is a very important ideological figure, right? And he is an insurgent, right, who has been trying to defy the Nazis, and him living as a symbol and him being able to help lead the insurgency in Europe, in Eastern Europe, is very important. And therefore, you know, he must live. But basically, you know, Rick doesn't know at the end of this film that there's going to be a moment, because it's clear that Renault doesn't like Major Strasse and the Nazis, but he is also a fair weather guy, where he literally says in the film, "I go where the wind blows," right? And so, but his own orders are unclear because he was loyal to the original French government. Now there's the Vichy, like, Nazi-backed French government. Like, he's just chilling in
I also
Morocco.
do love, even though, yes, look, I get it's Hollywood, so they have to do a shot on it like that. I even love when he has the Vichy war. It's like, nah, bloody hell, I know. I love it. I actually, listen, that is cliche, but it works. It just works, doesn't it? It's good.
Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, but to your point, like, the darkness isn't gone from Renault's character because somebody is going to a concentration camp or dying. It's just not going to be.
Well, let's not think about that part. You know, that's after the credits roll, guys. That's after the beautiful friendship begins. It is true. I hadn't thought that. It's a horrifying implication.
In many ways, not only is self-sacrifice the true champion of the movie, sacrificing a total stranger, also.
You know, the maddest thing is, that detail you told me, though, about the fact that they didn't like the fucking Laszlo actor is brilliant, though, because that's why I say in this film, the weirdest thing is, that part also shows that it's not really a traditional romance. In a traditional women's romance film, you make it that she could love both of them and that the suitors vying for her. Actually, you do in this whole movie. You never get a vibe from the Laszlo guy and Ingrid Bergman that they're into each other. You do get the vibe that she's into him because of his cause and what his mission is and stuff like that. You actually do get the vibe that she, just like Rick, the second she meets him again, of course, they're immediately magnetically drawn together. I even think that's the most brilliant part of the plot, is if people don't get it, like the Claude Rains character explains, she absolutely was going to do the opposite of what she said earlier. She was going to let Laszlo go because she needs to save, and she would stay back with Rick, and they would actually reignite their romance because she realizes that's what she needs as well. So you actually do get the sense she's just with him sort of for the cause. Like that. Somehow that works better that they didn't have chemistry, those two actors, I feel like.
I can't fight it anymore. I ran away from you once. I can't do it again. I don't know what's right any longer. You have to think for both of us.
Yeah, the central premise as well is an interesting one, that, you know, that Laszlo would be so destroyed without Ingrid Bergman, without Ilsa, that he wouldn't be able to continue his work, and therefore the resistance would lose a powerful force.
Which is a bit of a weird angle, but what, I'll accept it. Like, listen, is that ass really that good? I don't know about that. You know, you could.
I mean,
there's other women in the world, mate. You know.
It's interesting because also for the time,
I also just love the idea a guy goes, I could have saved all of Europe from the Nazis, but I'm feeling a bit down, really. My ex has got to me. You know what? Actually, she dies. Fuck him.
What's interesting about it's interesting for two reasons, actually. So first of all, it gives the woman a lot of power, which isn't typical, you know, for the.
She's almost the muse to save World War II.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you think about. You know, the noir movies and, you know, the kind of femme fatales, you know, that was kind of what female empowerment typically looked like in cinema at that time. I think Ilsa, she's all, you know, doughy-eyed over Bogart, who wouldn't be. But, you know, I think, like you say, that this muse-like quality, like, is that she's attributed to have, is a very empowering statement. And I would also go so far as to say the irony inherent into the premise is, if she left Laszlo, he would become like Rick. He would become like the Rick from the start of the movie. And so it's a mirroring of like, yeah, we can't have a resistance fighter turn into a fucking hardened cynic because she's such a heartbreaker. You know, the whole resistance would collapse in and of itself. And it's kind of just a little subtle telling of, yeah, actually, this version of Rick, the self-sacrificing, non-cynical version, is the better version. And if Laszlo was to become like Rick at the start, bad things would happen.
I mean, my joke could be, I guess
really
we should
smart.
all just thank our lucky stars she wasn't into Nazis.
yeah. I mean, if she started having an affair with Major Heinrich,
maybe we'd be speaking German right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's one of those like butterfly effect.
There you go.
Isn't
Exactly.
It? But yeah, I mean, like again, just the story is so well told with all of these little facets and subtleties that even though you do see the twist really telegraphed, there's even, like you say, a secondary twist just to give you a little, that little bit of like, oh fuck, okay, cool, like because in self-sacrifice movies. Which this is easily one of the best of, but it's also a trope. You know, we've all seen the movies, haven't we? Like, everybody loves a fucking, like, I don't know, Man on Fire with Denzel Washington or whatever. Everybody loves that shit where the good guy dies at the end to save for a noble cause. And you
Braveheart, all that shit,
yeah. You have like a man tier, and then you just fucking you don't talk about it.
Exactly.
But anyway, everybody loves the self-sacrifice movie. But what I love about this is, like, actually, Rick isn't going to necessarily pay the price, and I think that's fair. I think I do think that's a fair end. If this had ended with Rick being hauled off to a concentration camp, I'd fucking hate this movie.
Oh, it would be a dark ending. I know. Him in pajamas, getting a tattoo.
Yeah, fuck that. I couldn't handle that. So even though there is that really sinister implication that some innocent person must die for Rick to go free,
but the problem is,
well,
listen, I've already watched a 90-minute movie. I can't be getting reinvested in new people, mate. You just have to die, mate. I know.
to be utilitarian about it, though, like Rick has much more experience in terms of running rebellions and like running guns and everything like that. So, if we're gonna say whether one of these like petty low-life criminals that gets rounded up has to die, or Rick, who, by the way, sold his bar at the end, so probably has a ton of money right now to help out in some kind of North African resistance. Yeah. And by the way, again, to go back to the start, this movie was intentionally released with the invasion of North Africa. So it implies, there is a propaganda message here about let's help out the resistance in North Africa, right?
By the way,
they say they're going to go hang out with the Free French camp. That's what Renault says, which is the French rebels against the Vichy government, right? So they're going to go help them effectively.
Yeah.
By the way, a couple of things.
Genius of the phrase. I think that's the genius of the phrase that round up the usual suspects as well. It's giving you permission as a viewer to, it's fine. They're probably a bad person, right? They're probably a bad person. If you're known to the police, then obviously you're bad.
The only usual suspect we know in this movie is Peter Lorre's character Ugarte, who literally murders people for those transit lines.
And
he was a piece of shit.
Yeah, and he wasn't a stoic, beautiful man like Bogart. He was some bug-eyed freak. Don't worry about him. If someone has to die, he even sounded weird. Exactly.
The visas.
Exactly.
Have you got the visas?
It sounded weird. So at that point, you're creeping me out. I know. To get out of the movie. Yeah. No, there's two things also about this film. One that doesn't work that well, I think, and then one that does. One is they do over-egg the pudding. Like, they don't just make it, Monty, that Victor Laszlo's like a freedom fighter and what he can do. They make it like, you're the only man, you're basically the linchpin of the whole fucking without you it'd be not like he's actually some Kwisatz Haderach, Lisan al-Gaib god rebel guy who just, when he just walks in a room, Monty, he just makes people like rebel by playing in the French national anthem. Like, he's inciting them to be patriotic. That part is a little bit over-egged, right? But I get that they're establishing he's so dangerous,
Play La Marseillaise. Play it.
There are two MacGuffins in this movie that are stupid and ridiculous. One of them is the letters of transit, where it's never really even clear.
I know.
How these,
by the way, that's the one thing I didn't want to bring it up, Marty, because it just sort of undercut the whole film. But why is it like, they've got away again? Yeah, like with the magical godlike papers. If you have that, you just have to let them through, even if it's obvious they can rebel fight. Like, no, you can still just shoot him. You don't need that. I know. And then secondly,
but then Laszlo himself is the MacGuffin, because it's
of course.
Ooh, look at him with his crazy rebellion aura. Like, it is dumb, but. It's fine. We can forgive that.
The other part that I do like that's subtle that people will miss because they think it's just to set up the Renault character. But actually, that's also foreshadowing. So the way you start to get the hint that actually Rick is changing is when he goes and he just helps that woman by rigging the roulette for her so that she can get the money and then get out on the plane. And she's even the one I think that was like, hope we'll be on that plane or whatever. So as soon as he sets that up, you at least get the inkling it's possible. There could be something more to this character than what I've seen so far,
22.
Marquons les jeux, mesdames et messieurs. Les jeux sont faits, la partie continue. Marquons les jeux. Fini. 22. Noir, pair et passe.
Yeah, just talking about Captain Renault as well, right?
Love that guy.
I love him so much.
Yeah, I do too, right? But obviously I read Roger Ebert's reviews and essays about Casablanca because it's his favourite film. And I don't know. I'm usually good with this, right? Like, I'm the pretentious wanker. But he said Rains is a subtly homosexual police chief.
What? Where did that come from? It's implied he's fucking all the women. Okay, that's a weird angle.
Yeah, but so I think what Roger Ebert thinks is he's presenting that, oh yes, I'm having all these wonderful affairs with all these women because it's like a diversion tactic from but I don't know. But like it says it here. I'll read you what he said. He said stylistically the film is not so much brilliant as absolutely sound, rock solid in its use of Hollywood studio craftsmanship. Which, by the way, I reject that premise. I think it's brilliant, but whatever. The director, Michael Curtiz, and the writers all won Oscars. One of their key contributions was to show us that Rick, Ilsa, and the others lived in a complex time and place. The richness of the supporting characters, Greenstreet as the corrupt club owner, Laurie as the snivelling cheat, Rains as the subtly homosexual police chief, and minor characters like...
Wait a minute, I thought you meant he did like a whole diatribe. He just drops that in there like we all agree with him. And then, of course, Rains, that homosexual guy, definitely gay as shit. What are you talking about? I never got that.
A French person before. Maybe he's just confusing the French.
Listen, I can't lie. He has got a mad fruity little mustache, but everyone had him back then. And he's French, as you say, Monty. Even though I will say he does speak with like a perfect British accent. But suspension of disbelief makes that fine. Don't worry about that. I don't worry about that in the film.
Yeah, the mustache is very John Waters.
It's a bit naughty, isn't it? I know.
But I mean, you can't call someone.
Oh, I know. Come on,
having a mustache.
Listen, if mustache makes you gay, it's only the massive handlebars mustache from the YMCA. The rest of them are all okay. I think mustaches leave mustaches out. Disagree. I know.
That's the most manly of all mustaches. But anyway, yeah, I just thought it was a really weird thing. I did not.
That is a weird.
I just love, like I said, he just dropped it in there, like we're all supposed to just agree. Like, that seems fine. Nothing unusual.
I mean,
there.
Yeah, I guess he's not wrong.
I like the way he's also put it in there. Like he goes, like Bogart with his stoic gangsterism, and then Peter Lorre with that guy, and then obviously you have Claude Rains with his deliciously homosexual. Like, why is that? Why are you just Roger? What's going on, mate? What baggage are you bringing to the table on this review? Roger, what is this?
I just feel like
speaking of which, though, I'd just like you to know I have fucked a lot of my female fans. So what are you doing here, Roger? What are you doing, mate? What are you doing?
Even in that era, they could obviously, do things that would imply that he was gay.
Yeah,
and like they don't do those things because they spend all the time implying.
Oh, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that when we hear that baller line, I think this could be the start of a beautiful friendship. Roger Ebert just expects like fucking Casino with like fucking Joe Pesci, and the head goes.
He types it out. Renault is sus.
I know. How is that what you took from it, Roger? By the way, I just appreciate that at the end, or even on a film he appreciated, we found a way to roast Roger Ebert live.
Every time. I was about it. He was never getting off, even though he has the right opinion.
No,
he has the right opinion for the wrong fucking reasons, and I don't know what film he's watching.
And I can't lie, even though it's incredibly petty, I hate it even more when people like things I like for the wrong reasons. I know that's so bad, but that pisses me off more. I know it does.
What are we supposed to assume? So, like, I'm just going to go on this thought experiment. Okay, so Renault is into Rick. Okay, so I'm going with that. So I'm supposed to realize
it's already a fanfic. I know. Let's keep going. Okay.
I'm supposed to realize.
Basically, dude, you realize I don't know what year did Roger Ebert do this reviewing? Because as far as I can tell, he might have accidentally invented the concept of shipping. He might have actually gone ahead of K-pop and anime fan and invented shipping in a film from the 40s. For fuck's sake.
So the Casablanca fanfic goes like this. So I'm supposed to read that the heavy implications that he is trying to sleep with married Bulgarian teenagers for visas is really just a ruse to tantalize Rick. Like what am I supposed to do with that? It ruins Renault's character.
It could be you. I don't fucking know, man. Like, I don't fucking
Rick,
know.
do you want an exit visa?
Also, if he is in love with Bogart, that makes Renault the bottom. So this is a nightmare. Roger Ebert has ruined Casablanca now.
Here's the thing, Rick. You're going to need a visa to exit my ship. This fanfic's already got so out of control. I'm done.
But it just undermines all of Renault's, like, because we have to believe that he's doing these things for Renault to have some sort of redemption.
You know, the worst thing is, like I said, I thought Richie was going to read a whole paragraph. Just because he dropped that one word in, we're just ruining this fucker.
Yeah. Doesn't even elaborate and just leaves.
I love it.
Character gear. There you go. Just deal with it. Just like what?
I love it.
I mean, like, again, in the comments, if anybody else got that watching it, like, let me know why.
I don't get it.
Well, let me know how you arrived at the conclusion. I've seen this movie probably.
I've never even heard that implied as a fan theory. That's never even anything I've ever heard.
It's just never. It's Roger Ebert's own, like you say, gear shipping. I can't handle it, man.
I mean, he thought Zooey Deschanel was great.
That's true.
And, like,
Also,
I'm going to say, listen, Roger, you're not beating those allegations. You're in a Zooey Deschanel as well. Well, that's the sort of girl you like, is it, Roger? I don't know, mate. I don't know. Just saying.
To his credit, in an essay, because we'll move on to Roger Ebert now and start wrapping up. But he did an essay because obviously, as I said, it was his favorite movie, and it's called "As Time Goes By, It's Still the Same Old Glorious Casablanca." He does have a good
great title.
At the end, he says, Michael Curtis's direction of Casablanca is remarkable for being completely economical. He creates a picture anyone would be hard-pressed to improve and does it without calling attention to the fact that it has been directed at all. Mostly, he uses the basic repertory of cinematic storytelling as encoded by Griffith and rehearsed in thousands of earlier films, establishing shot, movement, medium shots, alternating close-ups, POV shots and reactions. Is there a single shot that calls attention to itself for its own sake? I cannot think of one, and there are dozens in films such as Citizen Kane. Curtis is at the service of the characters and the story. Nobody ever asks, remember that great shot in Casablanca? Because there are no truly great shots in Casablanca. Anyone who thinks that there are was misinformed. By the way, I disagree, but whatever.
I love the way he actually does.
I think that opening shot of Rick's hand on the check into the cigarette into his mouth is so crazy.
By the way, I love the way, though.
He's doing it a disservice.
He even did the Redditor/reply guy tweet. Like, if you think otherwise, you're a bloody moron. Like, why you put that? Just you'd scream.
Is it ostentatious like Citizen Kane is? I mean, Citizen Kane is the birth of modern cinema. Like, Orson Welles invented shots that didn't exist. He was pushing cameras for zoom-ins. This is how insane Orson Welles is. To get a zoom where he came through like a ceiling of a building, he just literally made a cutaway ceiling that came away as the camera went through. And so, it looks like on screen you're actually going through the wall, and everyone's like, how the fuck's he done that? This is all standard stuff now, but like, so no, Casablanca's not ostentatious, but everything is shot to perfection. So I again, it's like, I agree. I think it's wonderful economical storytelling and wonderful characterization and such a perfect script executed well. There's nothing that doesn't need to be there. But I think he's doing Michael Curtis's direction a great disservice, because I think this film
that's
holds
so
up
weird, because think about
beautiful.
what I mean, obviously Bogart himself is in a million film noirs that are good films, but they're very basic shots. They're like all simple, like this in this room. You can imagine they could have shot some of those in a week. Like that, I agree. Yeah. I thought this film was just very well done. It's very well produced and directed.
As I said, how Roger Ebert, right, leading film critic and fourth member of this podcast in depth, how he cannot see that silhouette of Humphrey Bogart when he goes to the safe, like how that shot is insane and difficult to pull off. To get a perfect, clean silhouette of an actor that is off screen, cast in exactly the right place to be central to an arch, with somebody behind them, and for the light not to be saturated or the silhouette not to be sharp and crisp. That is good lighting, good camera placement. Actors have to hit their marks and be exactly where they need to be positionally. That's a tough shot. That is a tough shot. Anyone who's ever filmed anything can tell you that. So I don't know. Roger Ebert, even when he's right, he's wrong.
Even the scene where in the flashback, when he's in the train station, they make you feel like it's a bustling train station, that you've got 1 second to get on the train to get out there. It's the last helicopter out of Vietnam. It's that type of vibe. Like they totally make you feel that. Even I imagine on screen, it's probably like 8 people or something. Like it's not like that she is. Like, so no, what a weird take that is. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, loves the movie. He was obviously as well. He absolutely adored Ingrid Bergman.
Okay.
In this, he has another line where he says every time she looks at Bogart, she paints his face with her eyes, which I think is a nice, eloquent way of saying I fucks him in every scene. But I mean, he's absolutely spot on there. I mean, every time Ingrid Bergman looks at Bogart, you believe in that longing. You can feel it. It's palpable. And I think, a lot of credit for her performance as well, because I think given that she is a woman essentially torn between two men, there's the man she really loves and the man whom she loves the idea of and the ideals of more than the man himself. You could easily, with a less accomplished actor, you could easily see how you would just be eye candy essentially. And it would be like, two dogs playing with a chew toy and it would get lost in the story. She's puts in a really strong performance.
Think how much better her acting is than the other woman he'd slept with at the beginning, who was just like the most one-dimensional woman character who slept with ever. Has no depth to her whatsoever, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's not just it's not just that she's an extension of it. Like when they have that argument and it's quite heated, and the flashback with the betrayal. I mean, she's got some good acting chops in this, Ingrid Bergman, and I think it definitely works. The fact like she has to be so strong. You could believe somebody like Rick could fall for her and be destroyed by her when she left. She has to be a strong character. So.
There's so much at stake, all you can think of is your own feeling. One woman has hurt you and you take your revenge on the rest of the world. You're a coward and weakling.
This is another one of these films, and they've all kind of been like this on the arc. Don't mention Jurassic Park, where they are perfect films. They are perfect. I mean, absolutely spot on. An execution of a directorial vision where the actors get it and bring, S-tier performances to the table. Immaculate dialogue, executed flawlessly, and with a message so profound that this is obviously one of the most parodied and referenced movies, more than The Godfather. As Duncan said at the start, Woody Allen made a parody pastiche of this film, right? Because he loved it so much. Even things like, Red Dwarf, beloved UK sci-fi comedy that Americans ruined. They're at it again. They have an entire episode called Hollow Ship, which is a miniature Casablanca, where the unlikable, non-charismatic character is cast in the role of Rick Blaine,
which is hilarious.
And chooses a shitty life so his woman can live hers, because he's a hologram and she literally gets deactivated so he can take her place, and he realizes he wouldn't want to be on the ship without her, so he returns to living with Craig Charles. This is everywhere. Casablanca is everywhere. Yes. Casablanca is like a profoundly influential film that is literary in its strengths and sensibilities. It's iconic, and like Monte said as well, you can never really tire of watching this movie.
I've seen this movie so many times. Yeah. I mean, this is one of my top 5 favorite movies ever. It's always entertaining. It's a really tight 90 minutes. We have, we'll wrap this up, but there's also like great comedy in this film. Like it portrays as a drama, but there's some like really funny moments. I love when they're trying to find a pretext to shut Rick's down, and Major Strasser tells Renault, like, shut this place down. He's like, how could I do that? He's like, find a reason. And then he just comes up to Rick and he says, I'm shocked to find gambling is going on here. And then they come out and they say, here's your winnings. Like, it's just funny.
Yeah.
It's just a great moment.
This cafe is closed until further notice. Clear the room at once.
How can you close me up? On what ground?
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Everybody out at once.
Because the whole thing has been, it's been set up multiple times throughout the movie that Renault is basically getting bribed via winning at a rigged roulette game. So obviously he knows the gambling is going on there, but it is technically illegal. It's really funny. But
which, by the way, that shows the suspension of disbelief, Monty, because if you think about how the mechanism of that works, the owner of the establishment walks up and goes, I think she'll bet on 22. Doesn't literally, I'm doing it like a mouth. 22. Wink, wink. And then the guy's like, yes, sir. Oh, you have won. It's all the money. Like, that would obviously be absurd if, like, the owner came and did that.
They address
it's to show you what they're doing.
A guy comes up at the end of that sequence is like, are you sure that everything's like above board? Sure. So they do address that.
Sure.
But it's just this movie entirely is like so tightly written. It has funny moments. Like, is it kind of a piece of war propaganda? Of course it is, right? Like, it was designed to inflame patriotism and support for World War II at the time. It was very, like, cynically rushed out to coincide with the Allied invasion of North Africa, which includes Casablanca. But it is ultimately a fascinating love story. It's a great story about, Rick and it's like probably the most quintessential anti-hero movie that there is, if we're being honest. And it's just endlessly interesting to watch, and you get something more out of it every time you watch it. You get more nuances of the characters in the background, or the incredible political and social complexities of what has happened. And it's just an all-time great movie. And by the way, has probably 20 different lines that you should know in order to understand the history of cinema. And also, as time goes by, which was like on the America Film Institute lists of 100 songs and 100 movies, it was number 2, only behind Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow. Right.
Yeah.
But it is one of the most
classic. Oh, by the way, there's another thing. Even if you've never seen this film, I guarantee when you hear the piano and they start to go, okay, you will immediately know it. You'll instantly know the song. Of course,
And this
be in your consciousness somewhere.
No matter what the future brings as time goes by.
Sam, I thought I told you never to play.
Yeah, I mean, this catapulted this song into the American songbook forever, and there have been a bazillion covers by all of the great American singers of this song.
And on that note, I mean, shout out to Arthur Wilson, Dooley Wilson, who he wasn't even a real piano player. The piano.
I mean, you can tell if you watch him try to play the piano.
I will say there is one scene where there is a scene where he starts singing, and it's obviously just playing a record. By the way, there's no way that sounds coming out of his mouth. That's
he literally
true.
just does this. It's like if you watch his head, it's very funny.
But I will say he did sing it, and has a great voice. Absolutely kills it. Love him in the movie. A fun little rabbit hole for people to go down is go look up why his nickname was Dooley, and it's actually he used to perform in whiteface, right, doing a mockery of an Irish person. This guy has.
Listen,
a wild
sir, my culture is not your costume. I'm not even Irish, but I'd like to do that one time for us.
But I mean, obviously, he was he was wonderful in this, and he did a lot of. I mean, he was in a theatre troupe. He if anything, and look, obviously, the sensibilities of the time and society and what have you, don't need to pontificate too much upon. He is probably a little bit underused in this, and it is a bit problematic that it's just like, play the fucking piano for me, mate, like he's a jukebox. You know what I mean? But
you know what I want to hear?
No, don't.
Played it for her, you play it for me.
Well, I don't think I can remember.
If she can stand it, I can. Play it.
Yes, boss.
but he is again so good in the film, and like the song is iconic. It's a recurring motif that tells you everything you need to know about love lost. It's central to the movie.
Oh,
so
mate, we didn't even talk
it,
about that detail. Like, that's obviously the way they set up that's when you're going to get this insight into Rick. Because, hey, I told you to never play that song. That's the only song I told you to never play.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
That is, that is totally off the table.
Yes.
And obviously, as well, Sam was kind of strong-armed into playing it.
Which, by the way, look, again, I can use suspension of disbelief. It's all okay. This doesn't actually affect me. But I will say, thinking about it now, it's like, really, right, you're never going to see this woman ever again. You're in North Africa. You're hiring a piano player. Rule number one of Rick's Club is you never play again. You know what I mean? Like, but again, I can accept that. Listen, that's just good script writing. That's allowed to be silly. It's a film. It's all good.
But yeah, I mean, he absolutely kills it in this movie. He did go on to have a pretty a relatively accomplished film career, but it was, despite being classically theatre trained actor, was relegated to the musical roles because he was a successful drummer and singer. And this is obviously his most famous and iconic thing. I mean, it's just worth mentioning that I think for 1942, you can look at it both ways. I've read essays about how problematic the film is and how it relegates a black actor to being just a musical role, and you can clearly see, even though there's no indentured servitude going on, he's at the beck and call of these wealthy white people. I totally understand that reading. I totally understand the way that it's coded. I get it. I've always really liked Sam as a character in the movie, and I think it's great that my reading of it, maybe in a more optimistic time, was always that here's a place where everyone fits in. Because you have a Russian bartender. Interesting fact about that guy, by the way, the actor, he was hired because Bogart wanted a drinking buddy. He was just a crony of Bogart's that he used to go drinking with, and he put him in Casablanca, make him a Russian barman. But there's a Russian there, and so I always read it like that. I always tend to lean to the more optimistic reading.
I mean, I think you have to consider the circumstances of Casablanca prior to, because the Casablanca, the city, is accidentally like the hotbed of all of this. Like, this was probably for a lot of people an escape. Like, they, the implication is Rick may be wanted in a lot of countries where he failed to, be on the right side of some sort of conflict. I can't imagine he'd be welcome in Spain, like, after what he did, right? So it's like, why are you in Casablanca? And a lot of people were probably going there because it offered, a sense of freedom that they may not have had other places. So you get that. And, certainly in that period in American history, being black in America probably wasn't super awesome. So maybe Sam, was there for, he was in Paris and he was in Europe, or he was in North Africa, partially to, have a better life for himself, potentially. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So it's, like I said, this is a movie that's been studied. And anyone who does like any form of media degree, you're gonna watch this film.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it in university in my film 101 class, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like one of the first movies you're told to watch, like, and almost every module about like 101 filmmaking, which and for screenwriting as well, because I mean, ultimately, this was another adaptation of a book. We've done lots of those.
A play too.
A play. Sorry, everybody comes to Rick's. Yeah,
which also explains like why it's kind of in one location and why it's focused on the characters. Like you could easily stage this, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to take something from one medium to another and to enhance it, again, it's a fantastically, fantastic adaptation of a work, and it is just textbook cinema. I mean, which is the word all the kids are saying right now, somewhat depressingly, but it really is just. I mean, it wouldn't make my top 10, right? But this is the problem with just how diverse and incredible film is. This movie wouldn't make my top 10 films. I could totally understand why, if it was held up as a top 10 movie of all time, though. I would totally get it.
Sure.
It is a perfect movie. For me, I just feel, why isn't it a top 10 movie, I guess? I don't know. Maybe the self-sacrifice storyline doesn't resonate as much with me as other movies I would place above it. But I again, I could easily see how this would be someone's top 5 even.
Oh yeah, for me it definitely is.
Yeah, it's just wonderful. Final thoughts, Duncan?
I've given most of mine. I just think it's a mega film. Again, I also say it's actually, for me, not even necessarily that much of a film noir. Like, even though just because of Bogart being it and the other people in the time period, everyone's going to think it is. To me, like, that's why I say if you don't like film noir, you probably still like this film. Also, the fact that it's cliched, it's one of those things like The Godfather, like Shakespeare, like the Bible, where yes, it's incredibly cliched that everyone says is good, but it's good for a reason. And like those things, Shakespeare and the Bible, or The Godfather, or this, if you haven't experienced these things, you aren't going to know what all the references are about. Everything else like recursively references back to this, or even apes tropes from it, or storylines, or aspects that we all remember from it. So I also think it's almost essential to like your film knowledge, as it were, or understanding of history and cinema to watch this film.
That's a good way to put it. It might not be your favorite film, but it's an essential film. It certainly is. Like, if I was putting together a collection of movies, I would urge people to watch so you could understand everything that comes later. This would be on that list for sure.
Well, it's also that, especially for people who haven't done a lot of research or don't have a lot of understanding about World War II. I mean, just this sets up you to go and actually research all this time period to understand the context of the movie. And it does do, it's not just Nazis bad, like we would see today. Like, it shows how complicated these social and political relationships were at the time, and how fast things were changing, within this conflict. And I think that's the real brilliance of it, is that if you are a young person who hasn't seen this movie, maybe doesn't know a lot about World War II, hopefully this like inspires you to actually understand what was happening in this period, because it will deepen your knowledge both of history and of this film. Right, and help you understand it. So it really is just an amazing entry point, not only to film, but to that era in history.
I'd also say I agree with a lot of what was said before. I think it's a really tightly done script. Like, by the way, the director and the writer should win the Oscar. They're mega in this. But it's not. It's also, like I say, unlike a lot of other Bogart films, it's not just a Bogart film. I also think Claude Rains kills it. Ingrid Bergman's pretty good. Like I say, I also think there's way more sort of subtlety and nuance to the film and the plot than I thought when I first saw it. I just remembered the big, broad strokes of it, and the main romance part. I did forget how they established the character. They set up the change. By the way, the change is very believable. He doesn't just see her and overnight he's in love with her. Like, he's even himself like initially resistant to it, but then he knows she's gonna have to come to him, and then they have it out a bit, but then you think he's resolved it, as in he's just gonna let her go. And like, it's very well set up, like piece by piece by piece. And then I also agree. I think the ending's actually even more mega when you understand the premise that like the Claude Rains guy sort of is just set up where, because in that this is another thing about the era. In the 40s, they do very obvious films. Like, you wouldn't have a really subtle character like the Claude Rains guy at the end turn out to be himself an anti-hero who sort of was on your side maybe all along, if that was the right angle. And that's actually such a clever twist, as you say, after the twist. You think you've seen the twist, you think you've not seen the film, but the last twist adds an extra element that makes the movie even better, I think. So it is just a really good film. It's not even usually my type of film to watch, but it's just mega. You can't really go wrong with this. I agree with you. I could watch this film every 5 years easily.
My final thought is also, like, hopefully it provides some context to people about World War II, where it's not like so easy of I would be the hero who fought the Nazis. It's like Renault's character, like, nobody's in control of this situation, and anybody could die for any stupid reason.
By the way, he's also right, Monty. What if the Nazis lose and then he has to go back with the French? Like, he's cleverly playing both sides and abridging it, because he knows I can't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
I don't agree with his level of corruption, but I do understand why he is like playing both sides the way he is. And like, I don't really fault him for it, because at the end of the day, he's just some podunk little police chief in a fucking colony. And like, it's not his fault that the Nazis invaded Paris and took over the government, and now he has new masters. You know what I mean? Like, and it really does, I think, shade in, how helpless everybody was in this situation and how shitty it was. And it's not quite so simple as like this on an individual level, I would say, of this battle of good versus evil. And hopefully it gives you some sympathy for people who are just caught up in this like horrible conflict, of which, even if you philosophically disagree with it, was very dangerous for you and everyone you cared about.
But that also is ultimately what everyone is trapped in the middle, trying not to think about the ramifications depending on which way it goes. It's like ultimately for Renault, he has to play it savvily, like he's doing, because if he doesn't know which way it's going to break. And obviously, if he gets caught resisting the Nazis, they triumph, he's dead. But as Duncan said, he might have to go back and serve the French who were going to try him for being too loyal. So it's And this is what I mean. It's like there's a lot of subtlety in this movie and a lot of shading of the characters that typically in the 40s, as Duncan alluded to, one of the things you will find in 40s cinema is characters are very one note. They are there to serve a story element or a plot point. Very often, actually, the original MacGuffins were people, and so you will find a lot of very one-dimensional characters where everything they say, it's like fucking hell. I get it, mate. But this is not that. And this is why, as I say, when we get into the 50s, you do start to see interesting subtle shading. Rise of anti-hero characters and things like that. So yeah, I mean, this is a story about complexity in a changing world, and it's very well reflected.
Also, if you were trying to make a piece of war propaganda disguised as a romance film and reverse engineered it, this is actually very clever, because the message is love and your own family isn't as important as winning the war. That's the existential terror we all need to combat. So it's actually quite a genius angle if you wanted to sell it, because it's an effective film.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that'll do it for Casablanca and our money shot arc. We will start, in honor of Halloween, our creepy deep cuts arc next week with session 9. See you then.